Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Quantum Action, the podcast that's here to take you to infinity and beyond. And talking about infinity and beyond today, we've got Jay Mckey with us from the United States, who's written a very interesting book called Leverage the Field to Success, for Success. And very interesting, this whole concept of the field, and being the title of the podcast, Quantum Action, Quantum Field. It's kind of all connected. Jay is a data analyst. And as a data analyst, came into quantum physics and discovered a few interesting things, wrote a book about it, and is here to share a very powerful message. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jay, tell us a bit about your journey into, this whole quantum field. How did you discover the quantum field?
So I'm a career data analyst. I've worked for a big four firm, a large multinational corporation, um, and the Office of Inspector General. And I'm currently actually working for a Washington, D.C. based firm. Um, but several years ago, when I was commuting down to D.C. from Chicago, I had a kind of epiphany in the shower one morning and sort of I had been always a student of quantum physics on the side, right? So I would check out articles whenever I came across a documentary on cable. I'd follow it and devour it. It just fascinated me. And this epiphany, the only way I can describe it is it's like three sets of experiences melded into one, and I understood how everything worked. Um, and so the first set of thoughts, if you will, is everything I'd studied about success, right? All the books I'd read, all the executive coaching I'd had, etc. Then the other set of thoughts were sort of everything I knew about quantum physics, which wasn't much. I'm not a physicist, right? I was a data analyst. Um, but everything I knew about quantum physics, and then all of my actual experiences in the workplace. So not just the successes, but also the failures, the challenges, the detours, etc. And it's as if all those things suddenly fit together and made sense. I understood how everything worked. So I scribbled down these insights. The insights led to the writing of a book, of the book, which took about 3.5 years. Um, and uh, and then, of course, as I wrote the book and began putting these principles into action, it was fascinating to see the results and to live the results. And so that's how I came into the quantum field. And I actually learned a lot more about it as I researched the book because I knew the concept conceptually, but I didn't really know all the technical terms.
Yeah, in fact, in the book, you mentioned the American Indians, and I thought that was a very interesting introduction. If you want to share that piece of information, that's really interesting. As you said, you went into research the quantum field to write the book, having knowing about it, but then trying to figure out more about it. So tell us about the American Indians, and then we'll go into the morphic resonance, which I thought was really interesting as well.
Yeah, so I was actually as a child, I was born and raised in Florida, and one of the things I'd read in one of the history books was that the Native Americans, the way that the European settlers knew a hurricane was coming, is because they would pay attention to Native Americans, and the Native Americans would pay attention to the local animals. And whenever they saw the local animals suddenly migrating to higher ground or to safer ground, then they did the same. So they're very in tune or in touch with the local animals. And this, of course, has been, all kinds of phenomena like this have been documented around the world, like the tsunami back in the 2000s, when animals and elephants all went to higher ground before the tsunami hit. They knew what was coming before it actually came. And so there's this kind of precognition that the field facilitates. And so animals are apparently more attuned to the field than we are. And so that was that example that that sort of the field helps explain precognition because in the field there appears to time is I don't even get into time in my book because it's pretty wild.
Now, also, what I appreciated, Jay, about your book is it's not very thick. It's a short, quick read. Sometimes books like this are like 450 pages.
When I sat down to write it, Fabrizio, I intentionally said it's got to be short. I'm writing for this for people who are professionals and ambitious and they're focused on their jobs, right? They're focused on their businesses. They want to grow their business. They want to grow their careers, and they don't have much time. And so I really wanted to keep it short and I want to keep the language simple. So I've actually some of the feedback I've gotten is that Jay, your title is a bit too, scary around the word quantum. Um, but using quantum reality to succeed in the corporate world, and it's kind of. But in the reality of the book, I keep it in layman's terms. I keep it really basic so that everybody can pick it up and go, "Oh, I get this."
Yeah, yeah, perfect. So tell us about the morphic resonance, because obviously, so there we are observing the Indians that are observing the animals. What about morphic resonance? This is an interesting one that you talk about these various experiments that they did in a laboratory and that with animals.
Yeah. So morphic resonance is actually a term uh, that was researched, and this term evolved uh, after observing animals and scientific experiments. And I actually prefer to remove that term because it basically all knowledge is in the field. And so the idea of morphic resonance is, to use the example in the book, is if you have certain breeds that um, that are similar, those breeds can access the same frequencies in the quantum field. And the quantum field, there is no time when it comes to communication. There's no distance, right? Einstein proved this through a mathematical model called well, I won't describe it, but basically it's entanglement, right? That communication between within the field is instantaneous. And he actually developed that model to disprove quantum physics and ended up proving it. So, which is really kind of funny. There's a great documentary called Einstein's Riddle. So, if you have a chance to take a look at that, it's fascinating. But it proves this physical reality that communication is instantaneous. And so, when these rats were subjected to experiments in Boston, um, and they had to respond to this light, right? They I won't describe it in detail, but basically they were put into this container and faced drowning. They had to get out of the container, and they had two options: to go through the dark entrance or to go through the light entrance. And they would receive an electric shock if they went through the light entrance. And what they discovered is over time, the generations of rats, um, their rate of learning in terms of learning which exit to go through, which is the dark exit, really accelerated. Like that, they're completely unexpected. Like this doesn't make any sense. How is this happening one generation to the next? And that itself suggests that somehow memory and knowledge is stored in the field, and somehow these rats of all the same breed um, are accessing that. The fascinating thing is that a Scottish professor in Edinburgh wanted to disprove this American scientist and said, "This is ridiculous, and I'm going to disprove your theory." So he took similar rats in Scotland, right? And this is back in the 30s, right? So there wasn't transatlantic travel, and he replicated the experiment. And the rate of learning for his rats, so the American rats, the rate of learning really went down. In other words, it took fewer and fewer reps to learn which exit to go out of. The Scottish rats picked up at that same level. They started at that level. And so and the scientific community, of course, freaked out and kind of stood back from it. But that's the idea of morphic resonance, is that as a breed or as a species, similar species, you can access all this knowledge that's in the field. Now we, of course, from an evolutionary standpoint, you know, the ability to do that consciously is not yet there for us. But the fact is, it's there. It's been scientifically proven through a number of experiments that the knowledge is all there. So the question is, how do we use that as business professionals? How do we use that as entrepreneurs to our advantage? And that's what the book is about. How do you engage this thing called the field to your advantage? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how? So let's answer the question. How does that happen? I mean, so let's say you're an entrepreneur, you started a business, and you're looking to take your business to the next level, or you've got an obstacle in front of you, you need to overcome this obstacle. How can you tune into the quantum field in order to gain access to the solution to your problem?
I call it the hack to using the field, and I'll explain in just a moment. But first, I mean, Fabrizio, I know that you've had a wide and deep set of life experiences, right? Both personally and professionally. So while I'm going through this hack and explaining how it works, if you could think about a time when you faced a really tough time in your career, um, either you made some tough decisions or some tough decisions were made for you, but you're not coming out on the other side in a tremendously better position. Like there's no comparison to where before you hit that and then afterwards. So if you can think about that experience, and then we'll come back to it when I'm done. Does that make sense? Okay, okay. And the same thing for, of course, for your listeners, if they could be thinking about that kind of experience. So here's the hack. If you're in a job and you want to get the biggest raise possible this year, because you want to buy an electric vehicle or a truck or something, a pickup truck, um, you need to not only, I mean, to guarantee that you get the big raise, you need to not only meet all your goals that are set for your job, but the ideal it would be to figure out what your boss's goals are and to help your boss meet their goals. Because if you do that at the end of the year, I guarantee you your boss is going to pound the table for you to get that big raise, right? In other words, they're going to support you, and which means they're going to support your success. Well, it's the same with the field. You need to understand what the main goals of the field are, and then you adjust your path so that they're in alignment with the goals or they seek up with the goals of the field, right? Then the next question becomes, well, what are the goals of the field? And there's really just two. One is expansion. So everything in the universe, I mean, literally everything, including the universe itself, has an innate drive to expand. Whether you're talking about bacteria and viruses, right? The Corona 19, unfortunately, is a great example of expansion. Insects, grass, trees, plants, animals, us humans, everything has this innate desire to expand. Even our own sun is expanding, and the universe itself is expanding at an ever increasing rate, right? So expansion is the main goal of the quantum field. The second uh, goal of the field is balance. And for this, just think about farming. So if you want to plant your uh, seed to get maximum yield, you want to plant your seeds in soil that's an ideal state of balance, right? It's not too dry and it's not too wet, right? It's got to be an ideal state of balance. Um, so that's one example. To get maximum yield from your crops, you need to start with an ideal balanced state. It's the same with athletes, right? If we look at the world of elite athletes, right? Elite athletes have to get plenty of sleep. They have to stretch. They have to hydrate. They have to maybe drink certain preparatory drinks like Gatorade and other drinks like that. So they need to be totally rested. But an athlete who goes out, parties, eats pizza, gets to bed at 2 a.m. and has to wake up at 6 a.m. to play the match, if it's going to be tennis or golf or whatever, they're obviously going to be perform suboptimally, right? So uh, an ideal state of balance gives you maximum expansion. The next question and next thought then is like, well, then why aren't we living in a Garden of Eden, right? If the field really wants balance, why isn't our world in a balanced state? That gets back to the first goal. The number one priority is expansion. Okay, so who's going to learn more when you give them an assignment? Someone that you give, like, here's 5 steps of, this is a new tool. This is a new tool that you have to learn. And here are 5 steps to produce the report I want you to produce. Or someone who is just given an assignment saying, here's the report I want you to produce, but I want you to figure out as much as you can about this tool, because I want to know what else we can get out of this new tool that we have at our disposal. Well, the second person is going to learn more, right? Because they haven't been given instructions. You have to figure it out. There's a new education approach that's rapidly expanding here in the US. It might be overseas as well, called project-based learning. And the idea is let's not teach them the concepts and tell them how to apply it. Let's give them a project so that they have to develop essentially the knowledge. And that turns out to be more engaging, more fun for the students,
They do that
and
over
they
here.
retain it.
In England, they call it the apprenticeship model. So the UK government reintroduced apprenticeships a number of years ago because they discovered that young people going to university were coming into the workforce and they hadn't got a clue what to do. So they thought, we'll scrap the university thing for certain professions. Why don't you go down the apprenticeship mode? So you come out of high school, you go into an apprenticeship, and you learn as you go, and that way people would learn a lot quicker and a lot more effectively than going into a university and studying from books. It's a bit like, learning to play golf. You can't learn to play golf by reading a book. You can learn some things, but the best place to learn to play golf is on the golf course.
Right, exactly, exactly. And you learn by doing, by experiencing, by trial and error. And so that gets back. So when you do that, you're then actually learning more faster than if someone told you exactly what to do, right? Because you're not learning anything. You're just reading a list. You're reading a list and you're checking it off,
Yeah, and
right?
you're
There's
engaging all
no.
your senses as well. You're engaging all your senses when you're doing that, instead of just reading a book or sitting and listening to a lecture.
And so another way to say to talk about that learning or that growth is to use the word expansion, right? You're literally expanding as a professional and as a person by taking that approach, by just jumping in there, rolling up your sleeves and going at it. And so that's why, throughout all, any culture in the world, the sayings differ. They might be nothing stays the same, or the only constant is change. That's by design. So you expand at a greater rate when you're faced with challenge. And so then that really takes a layer off of anxiety off of challenging situations, right? Particularly at work, because you can step back and you can say, it doesn't stop the, you know, feeling of the tightness of chest, the short breath, and you're going, oh crap, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to approach this? But it's amazing. The more you do it, the sooner you get to the point where you do step back and you say, what's really going on here? How is this going to benefit me? What am I to learn, or what can I learn from this? And it might be how to work with a difficult person that you haven't liked, and suddenly you're thrust into the same project with them. It could be taking your career in a different direction that you weren't expecting, and yet that's also exciting. And so you want to follow the juice, right? You want to follow that excitement and see where that takes you. And it might take you in a different direction, but you know what? All information is in the field. And so the field knows where you, Fabrizio, are going to be most productive.
So what you're basically saying is that in order for the field to help you, you need to take action. You need to move. You need to expand. If you're just going to sit and read a book, the field can't help you. You need to go out and do. And as you're doing, the field will start to send you the information you need. Is that what you're saying?
You got it. You got it. And a lot of times it'll be in line, especially if you're following your excitement, right? Not some idyllic end state, but you're following the excitement of every day. You're going to find things click and synchronicities happen. You may occasionally though run into a challenge, but that challenge is in essence the field saying, "Hey, if you want to get to that point, here's a lesson you need to learn first." So, and there's a great example of this. One of my staff years ago, and this is long before I had the epiphany. Um, she wanted to make manager, and to do that, one of the key criteria was ability to manage difficult conversations. And she knew going into the year, well, how am I going to do that? Well, fast forward about 4 or 5 months, I put her in charge of two other staff. They had a little bit of problem with her being their supervisor, and then they weren't getting along, the two of them. And she came to me stressed. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to get promoted, blah, blah, blah." And I literally, was quiet. I pulled out the job description for manager, being promoted to manager. And I said, let's call her Shelly. I said, Shelly, this is exactly what you need to get to manager. I said, so this is perfect. So she was stressed, but once she realized, oh, this is actually going to help me, it changed her disposition. And so if you know that that the field doesn't do anything by accident, then any challenge, professional or personal, is to help our own development, to help our own expansion. And it's a self it's a perfect feedback loop, basically, right? So we're thinking the field is altruistic by wanting to help us. The field wants to expand. We're helping it.
So as we expand, the field expands, basically.
Right, right. And that's why if you go into your path intentionally, number one, having an idea of the compass that you're following, right? The what drives you, what excites you, what you find passion in. And number two, being aware that challenges are learning opportunities. Then, it's kind of like the saying, God only gives you what you can handle. It's the same kind of thing. The field, once it sees that you're approaching it consciously, will funnel more. And so you'll not only find accelerated success, but you'll find bigger challenges. And it's only going to feed you the challenges you can handle, but the more you show you can handle, the more it's going to feed you.
Yeah, you've got to move. I mean, this is yeah, this is really key, and you've got to be a person of action. You've got to action. You've got to do. I always find that there's a saying that says that you pray as if everything depended upon God, and then act as if everything depended upon you. And that act, often answers to prayers come when you actually get up and go. Some people sit there and pray for hours and expect God to send an angel down and give them all all the things that they need. But revelation from God and or the field or however we want to call it comes as you do. That's what I've experienced. I mean, I have an idea. I want to do this. I need to make a step, even if it's just one step, and then the next step, and the next step. I mean, these people that I laugh at, especially people that come out of business school, and they got this thing about writing 60-page business plans, and forget the 60-page business plan. Come up with a four, five, or a deck, a, a deck with maybe 5 or 6 slides. That's your business plan. Then just action. Because believe me, you write the 60-page business plan, by the time you've written it, it's out of date big time. So, so just have the basic idea. How much money do you need? What the product is? What your market is? What your average customer looks like, and where they are, and how to get there. And that can be done in 5, 6 slides. That's all you need, and then just go for it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And um, just to kind of come back to that, to your action point, because I have an analogy that's similar. If you think about the field, the quantum field, like it's this massive electromagnetic field, right? That literally is the base of all physical matter. So in other words, it does form the foundational blocks of all physical matter, this quantum field. So, talking about skin cells, fingernails, tables, computers, at the base of all that is tiny little energy waves. So everything is connected in this one massive field of energy. Think about that field like soup. How do you want that field to respond to you? And that's through intentional action. So if you um, the way I would say that if you're sitting there praying and you're not doing anything, well, the soup is not going to change, right? Because you're not taking any action. If you take intentional action, then the field has something to work with. And it says, oh, I see, this is how you're responding. And it doesn't take much action. It just takes intentional action and being aware, raising your awareness of this engagement with the field, because you're engaging with the field all the time. Whether you know it or not, it's always listening. So if you're thinking, well, I want to achieve these 7 things this year in my business plan. Well, the field's going to say, okay, well, that's a lot. So I'm going to I'll respond in little ways. But if you have just one or two goals and you're really focused on that one, then that's a clear message. That's more like salt in a soup. You only need a little bit of salt in a soup to change the taste of the soup. But if you're kind of scattered everywhere, well, that's like dropping um, little grains of sand in the soup. It doesn't give it anything to work with.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Sometimes people think that in order to change your life, you need to make a major change. But even a major change doesn't come from one day to the next. I mean, if you're 150 pounds overweight, you're not going to lose that weight in one day. It's going to take a series of small changes to change that bit, to make that big change over time. I mean, I laugh at, some of these, and I won't name the person, but people will understand some of these personal development seminars where people go and they're using techniques like neurolinguistic programming, and they reckon that they can, cure somebody from something just like that. With, I mean, I'm an NLP practitioner, and I wasn't very impressed by the whole NLP thing. I find it very useful in sport, but I've seen people use it to manipulate people, and at the end of the day, that's fake. So it takes time for change to happen, and that change comes through small things. As you said, it's the grain of salt. You put that grain of salt in the soup, and it changes the soup completely. But that's just a small thing to make that big change. So sometimes it's just tweaking it. And the famous story is that of the British cycling team, which you probably have heard of. The British cycling team had never won any medals in any Olympic game. And then this new coach came in and he decided they were going to change like 25 different things by 1%, from things like the pillow, some of the things that they ate, all these small little things. And as the members of the team changed these small little 20 things, they started winning medals, but gold medals, like 10 medals available, they won eight. And then they won the next one, and the next Olympics. And that came through these small changes. And that's really what it takes. And I think sometimes, we want instant change and we think instant change needs to come through something major. No, it's the small things that help us make access that field.
Exactly. And things that you feel centered about, right? So the small changes were all things that the cyclists were already doing, but there was something that made sense that resonated with them from that coach. It goes, oh, this kind of makes sense. Let's try this. There had to be something authentic about that coach's approach, right? Not coming in and saying, I have the silver bullet, we're going to do it my way, but saying, look, let's just change these little things and doing it in an authentic way. So if I could go back to that word manipulation, you know, you if you want to use the field to manipulate, you're going against the grain of the field, right? The field wants everybody to succeed, not just you. And so whoever you're working with, authentically, you want to help them succeed. That doesn't mean we don't make a profit, right? The market is the market. And that helps us to compete. It helps us to improve. It helps us to innovate. It's actually it's a phenomenal tool when it comes to the field because it's got that incremental improvement always built in through competition.
Well, it's a bit like, when all these earthquakes happen and whatnot, and it's almost like the planet is alive and man has done something in a certain location, and the planet just wants to. It's like when a dog's got fleas, what does it do? It scratches the fleas off. And it's almost like the planet, like, I don't like what those people have been doing over there, so let's just erupt, make a volcano happen, get rid of them. And it's interesting that these things happen. And I think it's just the planet reacting, and again, even with manipulation, that through society, it always comes back to bite you if you try and go down that route, because at the end of the day, nature always triumphs. Nature always takes its course. The animals know this, so they know that when the tsunami's coming, they just sense it's coming, they take action. um, and and that's something I think, especially in today's world where we're so into technology. You see some of these young kids, walking around the park with their phones. You just have to walk down one of the busiest streets in London, and everyone's walking down the street on their phones, and they're not even realizing who's around them or what's around them. And people are moving away from nature. This is people moving away from God, from nature, from whatever you want to call it. And if suddenly the electric grid were to go down, most people would have no clue how to survive. I mean, I remember one day we were queuing up at the grocery store, and my wife and I we're big into herbalism and fruit and vegetables, and we eat healthy and that. And we don't eat any meat, and we haven't done for 25 years. And we're putting all these vegetables on the thing to pay, and the lady at the cash desk, she didn't know what some of these fruits were, and she, what's that? And I'm like, you don't know what that is? But there again, when we lived in the Middle East, our maid one day came home with this thing called jackfruit. I didn't know what a jackfruit was. And when I looked at it, I thought, I'm not going to eat that. It's a green spiky thing. And she says, no, no, sir, wait, wait, wait. She opens it up and she shows us, it's a fruit, but you can also make curry out of it. And you can use all of it. And you can use some of it even as almost like glue to stick things on the wall or whatever, like blue tack. Because from Sri Lanka, what they do is they try and use everything from the fruit. And it was interesting to learn this about this fruit. And then we went and did some research on it and that. And it's interesting. But, we had to go all the way to the Middle East and live out there. And this young lady from Sri Lanka had to teach us what a jackfruit was and how that could benefit our health. And I think we're losing a lot of this today with technology. And young people aren't going out horse riding. They're not going out playing football. They're playing football on a video game instead. And this is moving people away from probably being in tune with the field, being in tune with nature. And this is why probably sometimes the planet says, I don't want all these cities built, you're knocking trees down
Spread out.
and
Yeah,
yeah. So we'll
yeah.
just get rid of it. Earthquake, get rid of everybody.
When you look at the climate change, the global warming, I mean that's clearly, I mean the scientists. It's funny to hear, but scientists often use the term of the planet is an organism, and it's trying to heal itself right now. And it's basically
Yeah,
upset,
but the
and
whole
so
warming thing, and I don't know if you know this yet, but the whole global warming thing, it's not because of us and pollution. It's just a normal cycle of the sun. And this historically has happened every so many hundred years. But they're trying to blame it on technology and that, but that's not the case.
we could get into that because the spike is way beyond those past cycles. Right? If you look over at millennia, they've looked at through the ice cores, and Antarctica and probably elsewhere, and those spikes have happened. You're right, but our current spike is way above.
Oh, no, I mean, no doubt we are doing a lot of damage to the planet. I mean, knocking all these trees down. I mean, I had a guy on the podcast just yesterday, and he spent a lot of time down in the Amazon rainforest, studying the plants and talking to the shamans and whatever. And it's amazing what some of those plants can do. And he shared some experiences he had. And but they're knocking a lot of that rainforest down to build oil rigs and drill and build more cities. It's not necessary. That rainforest has got only 2% of the plants in the rainforest have been catalogued. So we only know what 2% of the plants can do for us.
Wow, really?
So you imagine what the other 90% and 98% can do. So we need to be studying those plants. And it's not, and he was saying, what the pharmaceutical industry do is they take and they extract stuff out of the plant. No, eat the plant, eat the fruit as it is. Don't take the vitamin C out of a camel plant. Just eat the camel fruit because you'll get vitamin C from it, but you'll get a lot more as well. But this is really, really important to go back to nature. And as you're saying, in order for us to synchronize with the field, we need to be in tune with nature.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, the from a field perspective, strictly science, there's been a lot of studies, not just here in the U.S. and in Europe, but also in China, where they've taken folks and they've kept them in, one control group stayed in cities and the other control group went out to a national park or something and camped out there for the weekend or just took hikes, maybe stayed in a cottage but just took hikes in nature. And they've also done this with folks in elderly homes. The more time you spend in nature, your body naturally rebalances, and particularly inflammation goes way down. And so for elderly folks, especially, they're doing more and more of this. It's becoming mainstream, Fabrizio. This idea that physically something happens with our bodies in nature that resyncs it, resets it, and gets it back to its more natural rhythms. And so I have a feeling that over time that's going to become more and more prevalent in mainstream, and we're going to see more and more things like parks in cities, so that people can get out there and be in trees and be in nature, even though they may be in an urban environment.
Or people moving out of cities, even people moving after, during lockdown, a lot of people moved out because they realize, well, you know what? I can do my job from a computer. I don't have to be sitting in an office in New York. I'll move out to Wyoming. It's cheaper to live out there. I'll sell my apartment in New York, buy 10 acres of land in Wyoming with a nice hut, or whatever you call it, ranch style house, and off I go. Got my satellite dish connected to Elon Musk's internet, and off I go.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And when you want a coffee
Um,
break, you just walk outside on the grass and drink your coffee that maybe you're growing
yeah.
in your back garden.
Yeah. My local walk, I prefer walking in the back alley because it abuts a small set of forest, a small forest basically. And so I intentionally take that walk because I can breathe in and look on the trees. And it's more, it's relaxing. Uh, and again, if you set that intention to be aware of that as you go into it, maybe take one or two deep breaths as you start your hike or your daily walk. It makes a difference, and again, all knowledge is in the field. And so if it sees that you're marching forward, consciously wanting to engage the field, it takes notice and it will make you a catalyst of change. In other words, it'll help your own expansion because the more you expand, not only will you expand others around you, but you'll be a model. And others will want to do, hey, how are they doing what they're doing? And they'll look to you as a model and start emulating what you're doing.
So here's a big takeaway for everybody listening to Quantum Action today: is take your team out rafting or walking in the on the beach, or walking in the woods or forest, or whatever you want to call it, and try and focus on expanding yourself and your team by learning more things, but being in tune with nature. I think that's really, really the key message that you bring here with your book. I encourage everybody to get a copy, read it, but above all, use it. Where can we find the book? Apart from the usual Amazon, of course.
It is on Amazon, so you can just go to Amazon, search my name, John J. McKee. I only have one book, so I'm a data analyst, not a author by trade. Um, so you'll find it there. You can also, I have a quiz, I have a website, mckeygroup.com. That's McKee with a Y. But you can type in McKee Group / free quiz, and there's a quiz. If you don't want to spend any money on a book, um, um, you can take the quiz, and the quiz has results that are based on your quiz score. So it's customized to your own individual score. And so then you'll get the results, and I do a little unpacking of those results as well. So it's fun. It's a fun quiz. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, thank you very much for being in Quantum Action. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Remember to subscribe, share this podcast with everybody, and we're here to help you take your life to infinity and beyond.